Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
Namadia, everyone, and welcome to episode 1177 of the Pantheon Plus Rewind, the weekly podcast dedicated to both Pantheon Rise of the Fallen's development and community. This week, we do a rundown of the new and improved monthly content schedule, recap on the last developer roundtable, talk about something controversial, and finally, wrap it up with some lore of what might be familiar tenets of our beloved Halnir Cave. The heat of summer is well upon us here in the Northern Hemisphere, but hopefully me, Desrin, and my temperate co-host Theric can keep you cool in this week's Rewind. Dude, Theric, I'm gonna die, man.
Are you? What's wrong? What's wrong?
Die. As I mentioned, next week I'm heading back down to California for a trip. Actually, I'm leaving not too long after this airs, because as everyone knows, we record a little ahead of time. But I am dreading how hot it's going to be, dude.
Yeah. What's the forecast on that?
I checked, and it's going to be about 110 Fahrenheit every day I'm down there, which is like 43 Celsius for, everyone else.
For us Canadians, yeah. Wow. That is way too hot. That's like not that's not livable for me, I think. For most of my people in my circles, that would not be livable.
Like, even though I did it off and on for about 10 years, because I used to live down there, it's still, I'm too used to this beautiful Oregon weather. I've been spoiled. It's pretty bad, man.
Well, you know what? You're also you're making it worse for yourself because you're speaking Elvish in your little intro there with Namadia or whatever you said. Because elves are I don't think elves would do well in high heat like that either. I think elves are very much more in the Canadian climate.
I would agree. And in fact, I see most Canadians as elves. They're just a whole different level of peopleism. But
An evolved peoples, if you will.
Oh man, where did this intro just go?
I take that back. I take it back.
Well, okay. Now here's the transition I've been waiting to do. You know who else is hot, Theric?
Oh, I think I know. Why don't you tell me who's hot?
Our scorching adventuring party. And and that is going to be Ziplocks on the Darkmer Rogue, Sparoh on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Screech on the Scar Bard, WikiWoo on the Human Enchanter, Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Corsosaurus on the Human Warrior, Fury Wrath on the Archai Summoner, Pavejo on the Gnome Wizard, Acera Avienda on the Elf Druid, and Churodude on the Halfling Direlord. Thanks everyone for being in our adventuring party, and for our viewers, make sure to keep an eye on that scrolling banner, which includes everyone that threw up a super chat in the last YouTube premiere or a super thanks in the comments. As Theric says, it's always appreciated, but never expected. If you'd like to go above and beyond and get your name read out on the show, feel free to check out our Patreon. But as usual, just hanging out with us and listening to the show or sharing it with others, it's more than enough. But it does allow us to do some pretty cool things, yeah?
Yeah, some pretty cool things is right, man. We are doing it today. We are giving away a pledge. It's one of those shows, and we are going big today. We talked about this on the 201 show on Thursday night when we were live streaming ESO, but we're giving away Scion of the Black Rose pledge today. So if you don't know, that's the newest pledge that VR introduced. It's a discounted pledge that gets you access to pre-alpha testing. So it's not full VIP level, but it is enough to get you into the next pre-alpha test. So that's the big part of this. We're going to give that away on the show today. So all you got to do is be here for the premiere. So listening live on YouTube with me and Des in chat, and hit me with an @Theric in YouTube with the play button emoji behind it. So I know your name. I'll throw your name in the hat and get you entered to win that pledge. We'll listen to this show together, and then at the end of the show, I'll throw the name into a random name selector and pick a winner. And it's just that easy. And the only requirement is that if you've won a pledge before, we ask that you don't enter again, so that somebody else can win. A new person can have a shot at it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be fun, man. This is the biggest one we've done. I mean, we've done others where we've given away multiple pledges that have maybe added up to the same sort of level, but this is the big one. And if you've ever wanted a chance to get in on some pre-alpha testing, this is the opportunity. And this is, again, like you said, Desiree, all because of the support that you guys show to the show through the methods that you mentioned, as well as just being here and hanging out and subscribing to the channel and allowing us to continue to do the show that we love to do. And this is the best part of it, right?
I can't even understate or overstate just how excited I am about this. Like, we've wanted to do a PA pledge in some way for a long time. And I can't wait to, find someone that, really wants to get into PA, and it's just, that's a high dollar mark, right? I just really want to make someone's day. I hope it happens. So definitely enter in, and I'm just so excited to see who wins.
Good luck.
Yeah,
everyone.
good luck. But yeah, we have a pretty nice chunk of news to cover here. So let's get started with the show. Yeah.
This week in Visionary Realms news and notes. All right, well, let's not beat around the bush and get right to the news that everybody's waiting to hear, because September 17th was the next scheduled pre-alpha test, and we were hoping to be able to tell you whether that was going ahead or not, because we were going to find out this week. But as of now, the time of recording, which is Friday, September 2nd, we still don't know yet. So unfortunately, we can't tell you whether that September 17th date is moving forward. Still keeping our fingers crossed. But by the time the show airs on Sunday for the premiere, we should have an idea.
Yep.
We should know whether one way or not.
Exactly.
So future us is excited or disappointed. We don't know yet. But right now we're still in a state of cautious optimism that date's going to go ahead. So yeah, we'll leave that for there. But let's look at the calendar, because the month of September is looking pretty good here from VR with their events. They changed it up. They changed up their content, their monthly events, right? So, we've gotten really used to the rhythm of the calendar, with the live dev stream sort of leading off the month, the newsletter the following week, and then the developer roundtable bats cleanup, to close out the month. But they're shifting that around. So what's happening is on August 31st, when the calendar came out, we got to look at that, and we're going to break down what exactly is different. So let's start off. The month starts off on September 8th with one of the new items. Now, this is called the VIP only dev live chat. And when they announced these changes, actually in the August developer roundtable, which we're going to be talking about later in the show, they give it a bit more description. They said it's going to be a bit more interactive of an experience. And this is the first one, that's going to feature VR's newest programmer, Steve Clover, who everybody, a lot of hype around, a lot of excitement
about
who's
him that?
Joining the team. Who's that? I don't know. Maybe check with Bounty Code.
I'll ask Bounty Code.
Yeah, if you don't know, Steve Clover was a close sort of working a friend and work associate of Brad MacLeod, and worked on the original on EverQuest when it was in its infancy in developing that game back in the day. So it'll be exciting to get to hear what he has to say. But again, this is going to be a VIP only event. It sounds like the format's going to be similar to what the developer roundtable is now. But the important change here, like I said, is that there's not going to be a public release of this. So it's value added content for the VIPs. So, unfortunately, what that means is that we won't be able to recap this here on the Rewind. It's going to be under NDA. But before you get too sad about that, there is some good news, because the other piece that they added here is they said, so coming up this month in September, on September 22nd, Minus is going to be hosting a regular podcast, Departing the Veil, which we've seen before. We've seen 2 episodes of it before. And this is going to be, though, live rather than a pre-recorded item. And it's going to be with Joppa. And it sounds like the content of these is going to be something similar to how we've seen the last episodes. But VR said there's also going to be in-depth discussions on systems, designs, and other topics. And also the format is going to be quite a bit different. And honestly, I think better. It's going to feature selected questions from the community about the topic they're discussing. And it's also a live show on their Twitch channel as opposed to a video going up on YouTube. So it's going to premiere, like I said, September 22nd, 6 p.m. Pacific. And if you can't catch it live, will of course go up on YouTube. I think 24 hours later, they have to wait. Yeah. So basically, the calendar tells us this first one is going to be about taming, mounting, and travel. So one of those topics that we just heard about, I want to say recently, but it's actually been a while, but we still don't have a lot of information about. So it's going to be very useful. And basically, if you think about it, like a developers roundtable, but with with Joppa every month. I mean, Joppa was always sort of like the fan favorite on the DRT. Everybody, I mean, let's be real, right? Like they wanted to hear what Joppa had to say because he's the creative director. He really has a lot of control over what is happening in the game. And we're going to get to see this live, and we're going to get to participate in it because it's on Twitch, it's a live show. So it's basically like a second developer update stream, if you will. So speaking of that, of the developer live stream this month in September, it's happening on the 15th. So we're going back a week now. And the calendar says we're getting our first look at some new character models, some class updates, and more. So yes, and all that. Those are both very exciting things, and we love to hear about new class updates. We did a video on the last 3. Drac and I collaborated to do three videos for the last class updates we got. This format hasn't changed. This is going to be the same as we've seen before. So what that means, it's on VR's Twitch channel with the live chat and all that, and of course Pantheon plus you to follow immediately after that with myself, Drac, and Nathan Napalm. So. And then the last thing on the calendar, and this makes a lot of sense to me when you think about it, is that the newsletter is now coming at the end of the month. It's basically going to summarize everything that's happened. And not only that, but VR said it's also going to preview the month ahead. So that's a bit of a small update to the newsletter that you may have overlooked. These are some big changes. And I still think, we're getting a very hearty amount of development information for Pantheon. I have to say, honestly, not having Kilson host the DRT anymore is a bit sad. Yeah. Not having his voice at the end of the month it's going to take some time to get used to. And he's been doing it a long time. But they said in the last roundtable, as you said in the intro, Des, the last one, he's focusing now on his role as conduct and security manager. So Ronek's going to take over the VIP chat aspect of that. So I definitely miss my monthly dose of Aussie, because I love a good Aussie speech, Aussie accent. And I'm going to throw it to you here, Desrin, because Ben Dean actually quoted you in the DRT. He said, and I'm going to do my best Kilson impression. He said, "It's been a lot of good stuff." That was you typed that, and you got a shout out from Ben Dean on that. So good on you. But what are your thoughts on the change to VR's monthly event calendar?
Oh man, it's so funny that he picked up just as I'm like trolling VIP chat.
Yeah, he totally did.
I don't know. As with any changes, I know there's plenty of folks that'll see that VIP only dev chat and think that VR is maybe pulling back a bit. But that's why I think it's just so excellent timing that they also, alongside that, are launching a live Parting the Veil simultaneously. So I agree with you. I think the new live Parting the Veil will be a much better format than the old DRT, because if our viewers, if you didn't know, old DRTs were like recorded a week before public release, and the questions came only from the VIPs. So now the show's, well, first of all, it's live. So it's immediately available to the public, but also the questions come from everywhere. Like Kilson's been throwing, the questions up just like even like the YouTube community thing, like they're everywhere. So everyone that follows Pantheon can participate. And so, even if they had just left it at that, like I'd be happy exchanging one for the other. But with the whole VIP only thing, I don't know. I'm not sure, man. I think a lot of people, especially people that aren't VIPs, of course, they're probably not going to be a huge fan. I did pledge VIP
to be expected.
So yeah.
Like it just has to, I understand, like I get that too. And that was my first reaction too. But, you got to remember that being a VIP has to provide some exclusivity, I guess is what I was going to say. But like there does have to be some benefit to being a VIP beyond the testing access. So I think this meets both needs.
It probably does. But even being a VIP, like I personally don't really care about having like our own private show or anything like that. But yeah, I can understand why they're doing it and trying to provide that little bit of value to VIPs in some way. But I don't know. I also, on the positive side of that though, I do think it is going to be a positive for that to be completely private, just because it'll make it easier for the devs to kind of relax and because it's all going to be under NDA, and so they can be a little less public facing with how they talk about stuff. Because the old DRT, even if they're talking to the VIPs initially, they are shortly after talking to champions, and then a week later they're also talking to the general public, so they have to talk in a way that is going to be publicly releasable, and so I think they've mentioned this on a public thing, so I can say this, but they've talked about the after party, as it's kind of been called, and it seems like this is more or less just making that an official thing. Just devs kind of chilling with VIPs, hanging out, and that's it. That is value. It's value,
and it's kind of the way it used to be, because they used to not like these dev roundtables for a time were VIP exclusives. It wasn't always that they got released to the public. So it's a little bit of a going back to that, and I think like we talked about this last week. Pantheon's getting more attention now, more attention from content creators like us. People, like, there wasn't always people talking about what was said in the DRT quite so much. And so, you got to take that into account.
Yeah, blame us. No, I think it's going to work out just fine. And the parting the veil is going to be a lot better going forward, I think. But yeah, like you, I will miss Kilson. I will miss all of the good stuff and just
good stuff.
Take a drink, etc. But overall, I'm a pretty big fan of this change, and I also the newsletter. I think the newsletter being at the end of the month is also, it sounds like a minor thing, but it super makes sense. Yep. And anyway, I'm kind of rambling on. I don't want to be too much of a shill for the new schedule, but I think it's good.
Yeah, no, because I just think it was important to sort of really understand what it was all about, because it would have been easy to just sort of look at it on a surface level. So I wanted to get a little bit of detail in about that. So that's good. Now let's actually talk about the roundtable from August, because that was released on Friday, September 2nd, as we're recording this. And this month we heard from CEO Chris Rowan and producer Ben Dean as they took questions from the community about basically everything from business models, publishing deals, and policy. And I've picked out what I thought were basically, like, in my view, the three most newsworthy items here. And Des, I'll ask you for yours, of course, at the end, and hear what you thought was important. But the first one for me was talking about their quest for a publisher. And we've talked about this before, but the question was how, they've said we've turned down publishing deals. We don't want to work with people who don't share our vision. But the question was, like, what exactly have those publishing deals offered? Like, what have they wanted? What have you turned down? So I thought that was really kind of cool to get some detail. I wasn't sure if they would actually answer this, because when you're asking business questions,
there's some privacy matters,
Yeah, they have to be mindful of that. But we got a really good one, actually. And Chris Rowan, he said the most common request was to make Pantheon more casual, free to play, and add microtransactions. So there it is. I think we could have assumed that, but I want to quote him here, because he gave a great quote. And he said, quote, "We don't think very highly of those business models. There are enough casual, free to play games in the world. We're not building that kind of a game. Making Pantheon casual and free to play literally misses the point and the essence that defines Pantheon and its vision. That would make it less successful. It might have a bigger pop in the first 6 months, but then it would fade and people would move on." So, end quote. So, as Kilson would say, love it.
Good stuff. It's good stuff, man.
Love it, man. Good stuff, man. Sorry, Kilson, if you're listening to this, I apologize on behalf of both of us. We you know how we feel about you. We like you. Anyway, he said, I mean, just sort of going off that quote, that's kind of what we suspected. But it's, again, nice to hear from the CEO and reaffirm it. They're holding their ground, and they believe strongly in the product, and they're not going to compromise their values. I like that Chris acknowledged specifically that it would mean bigger numbers in the short term, but less successful in the long term. And it kind of gets to the heart whenever we hear people say Pantheon's not going to work because it's not following modern trends. It's not doing things other MMOs are doing, And like he said, there's enough of those games out there, and there's going to be more of them. There's more MMOs being developed all the time. They're coming out on a daily basis or whatever, But Pantheon can be different. They can do it differently, and it can still work. But how did that sort of resonate with you?
I mean, pretty freaking well. I mean, it's not the first time that Chris Rowan has said like similar things. Like this question has been asked before, but yeah, I like that he recognized that whole boom and bust cycle and just kind of like waves it off. Actually, one of my favorite themes in this roundtable was this kind of sincere devotion to longevity. I wrote down a great line here in addition to that one that you read, and that's that they're looking to build a large, positive, healthy, passionate community completely immersed in an ever-growing world for decades and decades. And again, that they believe that this is going to lead to business success. In fact, he says business success, without fancy gimmicks or crazy marketing schemes.
Yeah, I love that, man.
Yeah, just hearing that from the CEO, though, it's music to my ears, really.
Yeah. Just again, it's like it's when you realize the potential for a real world, a real home for people. I mean, the potential from our standpoint, but the potential business-wise from that standpoint, it's massive. It's so huge. And if we can just sacrifice the short term for the long term, I mean, I think Pantheon, I think VR has got the right mindset here about this. So yeah, music to my ears as well. Now, the second item that I wanted to highlight from was Chris Rowan's answer to another question about how additional funding affects in-game things. So we talked about this a couple episodes, I think the last two, because we were talking about staffing, how it affects promotional ability and efforts to get more eyes and ears on Pantheon. But Chris used the opportunity here to address the issue of feature creep. And here's the quote. He says, quote, "The game features of Pantheon are already planned. When we tell you about something you haven't heard about, there's a 99% chance we've known about it all along, just haven't talked about it yet. We don't add new features when we get additional funding. The game's taking long enough as it is. Not getting into feature creep, almost all of it goes to content production," end quote. So firstly, I think this gets them out of what I'll call like Star Citizen territory. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Des. I am often, sometimes misspoke, say the wrong things. But I mean, when you get more money and new features, I just makes me think of Star Citizen and other games as well. The other thought I had with this statement is that I kind of find it surprising, to be honest, that some of the things we've heard about more recently were things they've had in mind all along, but just never spoke about. So again, voicing, our trademarked cautious or critical optimism, and I'm not saying he's pulling the wool over our eyes. I'm just saying like gliders, for example. That was something we heard about not too long ago when they were talking about Sorhirith and saying gliders are in. Okay. And what about taming and mounting animals that Joppa loves to talk about and we're going to hear about on the next Parting the Veil? I mean, were these things that have been planned all along? I don't know. And I want to believe that what Chris Rowan is saying is correct here. And I'm a little doubtful, if I'm being honest. But what do you think?
I mean, I do think a lot of people will be skeptical about the taming and mounting stuff being there all along. I wouldn't blame you. But if I had to wager, I'd say, maybe it was in like a loose idea. But I'm kind of thinking that the taming and mounting thing might have been more of a 1% side of that. I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe it was, already outlined, already designed, etc. But it's kind of whatever. I do think that a lot of what they say has had plans already. I don't get the feeling of feature creep with Pantheon. Much that everyone will like throw out. I don't think there's really evidence of it. Especially with, like, we were just having a conversation about redoing things. And that's not feature creep. That's actually making the game releasable.
Yeah, that's iteration, right? Iteration,
right? And so, but adding new features, I think it's a big concern for a lot of people, that especially with crowdfunded games, because they don't have a release date yet. And so it's a valid concern. Right. So I do like that they just kind of stamp it out. They even relate to it, because they're like, yeah, the game's taken long enough. We don't need to add any extras. I like that too. And so, like that quote you mentioned, they never add on new features because of new funding. So basically, more money just goes into completing things faster, not putting more things on the list to complete. And then they've said that in the past in kind of different ways, right? But I think that it's just so clearly said here. Like, they know what the perception is. And I feel like they went above and beyond with answering this question, I think, because they could have just reiterated what they said, but they just kind of directly were like, no, guys, we straight up are against that. So. Yeah,
I liked it when he said, the game's taken long enough. It's like, one of us. One of us.
They know.
He sees it. He sees it. Yeah. So yeah, that's I'm glad they addressed it that way too. I think you're right. And then lastly, for me, this ties back to Kilson's new role that I noted earlier. The question was asked about what VR's play nice policy is going to look like, as a general term. That's not what they're actually calling it. And Ben Dean gave us the quote for this one. He said, quote, "To reiterate, we've set up a new role for conduct and security manager, whose primary role is this sort of thing. That person is Kilson." And then Kilson jumped in to talk about his role a little more. He said, so the term play nice is a little condescending. He said, they've changed it to community conduct. They'll have clear and concise coverage dealing with bullying, harassment, discrimination, and toxicity across all platforms, including in-game. They're looking to take it a step further and define what those terms mean, saying that it's very important to them, and the policy is next on the list to get done. So, Desrin, this was something we speculated again on previously, as we do, and we got a pretty clear definition now of what his role is, because it wasn't exactly clear before. And if anyone knows knows the community, the Pantheon community, and how to manage it, Kilson does. He's been doing this a long time. Going back to the forums, this has been his job. And I think you'll agree with me when I say that, the guy has the patience of a saint sometimes, because let's be honest. We've seen some pretty rough, behavior sometimes that people just don't, people get angry and people get upset. And, sometimes you have to deal with that. And they need a policy to address this. This is only going to be a bigger issue when the game is actually playable. It's going to have to be addressed. And so anyone who's listening to this, anyone who's played an MMO knows, or I would expect people know a policy like this is needed. There's probably folks who think it's necessary.
Yeah, leave room for the opposition.
Yeah. I have some people want the Wild West of whatever, and it's just not really realistic in my opinion. Policies like this are necessary, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you're worried about something like this, just be respectful to people, and really the policy won't impact you. And people are going to disagree with me on that, I know, but that's okay.
You may as well just say, if you're worried about it, you're probably the one that's it's targeted.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's a much harsher way of saying than what I said. So thanks, Des.
Here come the comments.
Here they come, yeah. So, again, so those are my DRT highlights. I don't know, Des, if you have any comment on that specific piece, or if there's anything else that stood out for you.
You know me. Yeah, I think everyone knows me. There's a few other things that stand out to me. Let's see. One thing that I have to say, overarching, with this DRT, because it was two communication guys, CEO, just because that's if the CEO is not communicative, that's a pretty dire situation. But
you're kind of in a bad spot.
But Ben as well, right? So two kind of figureheads. And as far as communication goes, with talking about expanding the team, we talked about this earlier, and we kind of covered it in previous episodes. But I think it's important to see like how they're communicating these things and the overarching themes, right? And so, okay, before I go further with that, I'll just summarize, just in case we get people that didn't listen to everything. But basically, with the expansion of the team, is that they have a lineup of positions that they'll fill if they meet a certain financial threshold. But they're always emphasizing being frugal, and so that's kind of the overarching theme. It's like they're not wasting money. They already have a plan for where the money goes before it comes in. Like, that's great, right? But it went a little bit beyond that in this DRT, and it's kind of funny when it comes to that open communication thing. CR does a bit. CR Chris Rowan, sorry. It does a bit of a brag about their communications, particularly the newsletter in comparison to others in the industry. And when we're talking like in the AAA space, and he mentioned some interactions with a producer from a multi-billion-dollar company that like they use the newsletter as an example, like as a positive example, and Ben makes sure to use that opportunity to shout out to the community for always giving feedback and helping them improve. And Ben recognized that they've made plenty of mistakes and had their share of difficulties. But again, circling back to that feedback from the community, that's always been just really effectual in shaping their communications. And I love that even, CR makes sure to say that they, oh man, CR's kind of funny because I think he's a little more direct in some things, right? Because he straight up says, they really appreciate emphasis on constructive criticism. But he even says even the purely negative stuff also informs them. So regarding the whole scope of how they communicate and the level of depth that they communicate, because it would be one thing, I use the example as like the hiring, because they could have just said, yeah, we've got a lineup of people that we're planning on hiring, but they always emphasize like, we're doing this in a way because we're being frugal. If you've heard any of their talks about financials, they act like a crowdfunded MMO should act, I would say, because we see other crowdfunded MMOs that do the boom and bust cycle that they'll hire like dozens and dozens of people as soon as money starts coming in, and they immediately get too like big for their britches, right? And they just, but VR like consistently makes these things clear in every detail that they communicate. And I thought it was like really interesting that he got that feedback from another industry person working at a AAA studio saying like, you guys are the communication you guys do is top notch, like sort of setting the standard for game companies communicating with their community. I mean, they have to because they're crowdfunded. I get that, but like still, even so, it could be so much worse. Yeah, I one thing that he also pointed out, kind of in that section, was just that there a lot of times these big companies are surprised by how much VR will share, and I know there are people in the community that are never going to feel like VR shares enough, right? But I would say if you apples to apples this with most other in development games, there's no doubt. Like they share so much and so early. I think that was one of the main things that CR pointed out, was that like they've shown stuff way early, and a lot of times to their detriment, right? But they've gotten through it. Anyway, I'm getting way too fanboyish here. But let's find another kind of random note that I think might be pertinent to our viewers if they don't end up listening to the DRT. But a few people were asking about a sizzle trailer.
I thought this was
really interesting. And Ben, because Ben gave a little bit of inside info about like just how much professional trailers can cost. So the end all be all is that they probably aren't going to waste money on that kind of a thing. But instead, they're going to keep doing these kind of little videos that, I mean, I don't know about you, man. In my opinion, I feel like these spread just fine. Yeah, especially, the content creators, we recycle. We recycle it. Yeah. But yeah, the reason I bring this up is just because I think it plays into the idea of slow burn. Again, since we're just talking about the financial responsibility, but this translates into marketing as well. And that kind of slow burn mentality I really enjoy about Pantheon's development is like, on one hand, yeah, sure, maybe they could dump $500,000 into a professional trailer with some CGI and stuff, and they get a bunch of hype and a bunch of people start pledging. But, as they said, after that big burst of people, it would probably just fall off, shortly after. Yeah. And they would have spent all that money on not the game.
I'm gonna give you two very recent examples of this. So I don't know if you saw the trailer for Dune. There's a MMO survival game coming out called Dune that I think they put out a trailer this week. It might have been late last week. Watched it. Cool trailer. Super cool. Zero gameplay. I have no idea what that game looks like when you're gonna play. I really don't. Like, I like the trailer because it's pretty, but I know nothing about the game.
What a waste of absolutely nothing about the gameplay.
Yeah, what a waste of money that is. Like, I get it if you like it too, but I'm telling you, for somebody who knows nothing about the game or hasn't been following it, like, it doesn't do anything for you. Secondly, and I don't know if you saw this because this is more recent, but Fractured is another game that's coming, I think, getting released soon. Did you see their live action trailer that they did where it's actual? Yeah, there's like actors and like there's a composer that did a song for it, and I think she's like really well known. It was pretty cool, I gotta tell you. And I mean, I don't think it cost the same amount for like a $500,000 like they were talking about at the roundtable for a high-end CGI trailer, but something like that is pretty neat, and that's thinking outside the box, I think. I mean, you don't want to go too cheesy with your live action stuff because it can get a little cringy, but like something like that would be kind of cool for Pantheon if they could get it, up to a decent standard, if it didn't cost too much. But like you say, I think at the end of the day, Pantheon's identity is frugality. And I think that anything that looks like it's way over the top is going to feel really shocking to see, and I don't think we would expect
I think it's like kind of the overarching theme here is, if they get money, where do they spend it? On the game. Like, I could probably summarize like all that into just...
Give us the steak, not the sizzle.
Oh my gosh, there! What a brilliant! That was so good. That was so good, man.
Tying it back.
Let's see other things. Here's kind of interesting tidbit that I think is honestly a kind of major clarification that just kind of slipped by, but that's the naming of the pre-alphas. So in case you guys didn't know, Pantheon's currently in what has been called pre-alpha 5. And previously, there was pre-alpha 1, 2, 3, all that. But funny enough, this kind of cracked me up because I could totally see this, how this would get out of hand. But Ben said that they didn't even really start naming them like that on purpose. It just kind of happened. And so the question was asking, would this next PA be PA 6, pre-alpha 6? And the answer was basically no. they're dropping the number thing because it turns out it didn't even have like any internal meaning anyway. And we're nearing the end anyway. It just just cracked me up though.
Yeah, I kind of am not surprised at all. I also kind of think it like once it got beyond PA 5, they just don't want that number getting too high, like. And
there was,
we get to PA 12.
There was that one quote where I can't even remember which dev said it, but it was like someone asked, "Is pre-alpha 5 the last pre-alpha?" And they said, "Yeah, pre-alpha 5 is the last one." And that one quote has haunted them for so long. That's true. But in reality, it's like, it doesn't matter what it's called. Like, you see what the game is now?
It really doesn't.
Like, do you want to call that a new pre-alpha? Sure, you might be justified in that, but it's just pre-alpha. And then we'll get to alpha. It's all arbitrary.
Yeah, semantics.
Actually, speaking of pre-alpha, another thing that kind of tickled me was, in addition to the more regular pre-alpha sessions starting up again, that they do want to do some more smaller scale focus testing as well, and that sounds like it would continue into alpha. So, and guys, if I'm allowed to speculate a bit here, it can happen every once in a while, but I'd kind of imagine that maybe PA testers or VIPs might get some additional focus testing assignments, like even in alpha. So maybe the folks that were in pre-alpha before, a smaller group, can target specific things even during alpha to help development. And I don't know, I'm excited about that stuff because I'm a fan of focus testing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't had the opportunity to participate in any of those yet.
Me either.
Yeah, they sound like fun. I mean, we'll see.
I think it's just really smart to use a group of people to really hone in on something that expands past the QA team sometimes. But also, you could see it as another benefit for VIPs or PA testers that goes beyond pre-alpha, because pre-alpha is going to end, and I'm sure they're probably looking for ways to give value post pre-alpha as well. So yeah,
sure. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Again, on that kind of theme of pre-alpha, and I think this is an important thing people have been talking about lately after that quote about them loosening the NDA, and they just wanted to clarify that when they're talking about loosening the NDA, that would be for alpha, not for pre-alpha, and again, right. Loosening doesn't mean dropping the NDA either. So, yeah, I know some folks were starting to think that they would be opening that up before alpha. It was just kind of this thing that's been talked about a few times, and I don't know if it's just where it came from or rooted in some misunderstanding, but it sounds like it's probably not going to happen. We'll have PA, we might get a co-stream or something like that, but I wouldn't expect a loosening of the NDA until alpha, and then again just loosening. So
yeah, I think they were just reiterating what they've said before on this. This didn't come across to me as new information. So I mean, but that's not going to stop me from bugging Ben Dean to give me some exclusives.
The streamer program
for the
is still open, just FYI. But yeah, I wanted to put it in here just because, like I said, it's been talked about a few times, and I think that's probably why they answered the question as well. It's just like, no, guys, pre-alpha still pre-alpha, all that. But
yeah.
Okay,
sure.
So I know I'm kind of dragging on here, but there is kind of a big philosophical thing that I've got to highlight, and then I'll stop doting on Visionary Realms for at least a short time. It's when they're talking about marketing as kind of the end of pre-alpha draws near, and I think the question was something like, how will you convince new potential VIPs or PA testers to pledge? And I really liked their answers. Basically, they aren't. Their main goal is just to increase awareness, as they said, and not try to push pledges. They said they're more looking for. Man, I love this. So they're more looking for a community that gets it, as in folks that are a philosophical match for the game. Man, I think that's huge.
Well, it's kind of like the publisher, right? It's the same idea as the publisher. True. They kind of want people to, it's easier if you're sort of in line with their beliefs and their values about what crowdfunding should look like, how it should go through, what it should involve. I thought it was really interesting how they talked about some of the details about when is the right time to end the marketing push for VIPs, because we've said it before, like, is that time coming soon? We sure hope it is. And how is that going to, what signs should we look for when that's about to happen? Right.
Yeah, man. They did kind of touch on, they do have like phases of marketing, and they're currently in like one kind of section or whatever, but I doubt they're going to actually openly talk about that too much, right? But I just love this answer because, you know, it's just really heartwarming for me that their perspective isn't just trying to convince people to like their game and spend money. Obviously, they want people to buy their game, but I think they see that kind of hype train kind of marketing, and because that's just constant now, they're looking for a different kind of approach, and that's to find people that are already looking for something like Pantheon and just making sure they know about it. And it's almost novel, and it sounds so simple, right? But I think the end result of that philosophy is going to be a much longer lasting game. Because could you imagine if a bunch of people dive into Pantheon that are probably just bound to never like it? Because that's going to happen. Like it's not for everyone. It's for a lot of people, but it's not for everyone. And that's going to just kind of combine into what we see in all these other games. Play it for a little bit, find out it's not for you, and they leave. And I'm like they said, they're here for decades and decades, right? So this is a great approach.
Building a strong foundation. I agree.
Okay. I think that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, well, that's great, man. That's a good perspective, and that's the news for the week. Let's switch over to our notes for Pantheon Plus, and here's the schedule for September 5th through to September 11th. So on Monday, CryptFox is playing some Resident Evil on his Twitch channel, and Drac is playing EverQuest at midnight Eastern time with his pals. So there's that as usual. Tuesday, we've got a very special video coming on our YouTube channel, and this is a new series. We haven't really fully settled on the title yet, but basically two members of our Plus Guild, Sarah and Essen, married couple that are both awesome members of our guild, have decided to do a video about racial abilities in Pantheon and what are the, what bonuses and what penalties should the races have? What should they do better than the others? Anyway, I'm working with them to make this video. I'm doing the editing, and it's so much fun. I can tell you, I can't wait till everybody gets to see this because it is quite hilarious, the conversation that these two have. And like I said, we haven't fully settled on the title of it, but for now, it's what did we call it? Couples conversation about Pantheon or something like that. Anyway, it's going to be lots of fun. Look for that Tuesday morning on our YouTube channel right here. And then that evening is the 101, MMORPGs 101. We're still playing again, Elder Scrolls Online. I don't know why I have that in my head.
It's because every single time I call it Elder Scrolls Online, it's going to penetrate your mind, craziness. Man. It's never leaving.
Yes, it is. No, it's in there. 9 p.m. Eastern on our Twitch channel, Pantheon Plus, Twitch TV. On Wednesday, Wizen has another journal article coming up, and you're going to talk about this in the next section, Des, so I'll leave that there for now. But that's going to go up on our website, pantheon.plus. Thursday, I mentioned earlier, Fractured is a new MMO that's coming out. RedbeardFlynn is doing a video all about it. So look for that on his YouTube channel. I've got a video that I've been working on. I want to mention this because I talked a little bit about a video I was working on, talking about all the dungeons that we've seen so far. As I got more into making that video, I realized how huge it was and how I wasn't really doing it justice. And I wanted to split it up. So I'm going to do each one individually. And we're starting out with Halnir Cave, our old reliable Halnir Cave, where we've seen so much of, doing a deep dive into the lore and the adventures that have gone on in there. And you're going to hear a little bit of lore about that at the end of the show here. And then on the Thursday night, of course, we're playing Elder Scrolls Online with you, Des, and me, and Stands in the Fire. And Tetsu, although this week coming up, you're on vacation, so we will have a replacement. I don't know who that is yet, but we will have somebody subbing in for you. And again, that's 7 p.m. Eastern here on YouTube, live streaming on YouTube. Friday, Sparoh's playing EverQuest P99 on her Twitch channel, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Saturday night, Nathan Napalm is back for Cringe Pony TV, another episode on his YouTube channel, starting at 11 p.m. Central. And that's it for the schedule for this week, and it's also this week's VR news and notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right, Derek. This one cracked me up, man. It's such a bait. This started as a forum post by none other than our very special Benonai. And the title is Pantheon Rise of the Fallen needs aerial combat. And
what? I didn't know about this going in. You didn't tell me what the topic was, and I purposely didn't want to know. So
the shock value kind of controversial. Is so good. And the best part is that Kilson even promoted it on their social media as well. So he's just fanning the flames, right? It's so perfect though, because we were just talking like the other week on clicking an article or not clicking an article and reading it before like sharing it or responding, right? Yeah. And this is a perfect example. So I couldn't help but mention it. But like I said, it's totally a bait. Benonai's talking about, or he's not talking about fighting stuff as we fly around the world. Instead, I'd say this is more about fighting things that fly. Especially in high places. Oh, okay, yeah, you see where we're going here.
Because it makes you think of like fighting on Dragonback, fighting on Griffinback.
Right.
It's not about that. It's about fighting those griffins and dragons that are flying around.
When you cannot. And so Benonai lays out a few scenarios about like kind of around that bridge shown in the big Silent Plane screenshot. If you remember his thread on conspiracy theories about all that. But it's kind of imagining how a battle would commence if there were flying creatures like, drakes or whatever swooping around. And more often than not in MMOs, we either fight flying creatures, as we've kind of talked about with the... was it a hawk in the, a few months ago when they're showing a monk kind of fighting something and...
it flies by in the background.
There was like a certain point where we were in combat and this like bird that was just kind of like flying in front of the monk. Like actually, I think he almost died too. But it just kind of like flies there and occasionally does the attacks, but it just stays at that convenient, distance. That's often what we see, right? Or we fight dragons that just conveniently hang out on the ground as we slay them.
That most vulnerable.
Yeah, right. But it sounds like Benonai is suggesting something a little more interesting. And while I'll straight up say right now, my kind of game dev brain, it already is going to like, oh man, like that take a lot of extra effort to set up. But admittedly, it also makes me just super giddy with possibility. So let's just have a quick fun chat about it, right?
Sure.
Sounds good. So one scenario is with, let's say, these flying creatures, maybe they fall to the ground when they're CC'd. But otherwise, they play to their strengths. They use ranged attacks while they fly out of reach. Occasionally, maybe swooping down, which would give some chance for melee character CC. But he also ties this into some other like unconventional movement patterns. Like if you fear a ghost, maybe it doesn't just conveniently walk along the ground. It's a ghost. Maybe it flies up, or diagonally instead of just right there. Or maybe having to deal with a certain amount of range, or to deal a certain amount of range damage to a dragon to wound it enough to make it land. But yeah, honestly, dude, this tickles me so much because it makes me think of some of my favorite parts of the Souls games, but also another big, right. You can't help but think about it when you think of these things. And the other big one is Monster Hunter. Again, very scripted fights, but this is what I'm imagining. But of course,
one of the, I was just going to throw in there my example too. One of the best examples of this is the very first fight, really big fight you get into in Witcher 3 is with a griffin. And you have to bring it down. It swoops in and it'll come down and try and get you. And then you got to bring it to the ground before you can really damage it. And it's great.
Yeah.
Super fun. It
makes it a lot more interesting. But yeah, of course, as we can expect, the thought comes up that this won't be fair for all classes. If they don't have kits to play into this as well. And it's funny because Dorothea notes this in a kind of, I don't know, kind of funny way. So the quote from Dorothea is, sorry, I'm punching the mic again. I think needs, as the title says, is not at all the right word. But if the game has something like this, there will doubtlessly be complaints that it's much harder for melee than ranged classes. And then ends out with saying, fine with me. I rarely play melee classes. But yeah, Theric, like, what are your thoughts on that? You mentioned you have some fond memories, that kind of mix up the flying experience. But like, what about MMOs? Like, do you have any good experiences where like fighting flying things makes sense?
Trying to think of other MMO examples, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. But I think that there should be stuff that some classes are better at dealing with, or even able to deal with at all than other classes. I mean, like, why does every class need to be able to deal with all the threats, equally? Or, I mean, if you're getting attacked by something that's flying and you're a melee class and you don't have any ranged attack for it, make friends with a ranged attack person. What can I tell you? Like, I'm sorry, but the game is not made just for you. It's made for groups of people. It's made for partnerships, duos, trios. Find yourself a ranger, find yourself a wizard, and get it out of the sky and then jump on it. I mean, come on, like, the content doesn't have to be equally tackleable by everybody.
Right. Dekenzu actually notes that it seems to fit with Pantheon's focus on strategy. I would say like dynamic combat, but Dekenzu also says like maybe it's more for an expansion, and maybe notes there are some alternative options that they could do though, for melee classes to kind of help them deal with those situations. And one example here is like, or one statement I should say from Dekenzu is, every fight, as you said, does not need to be perfectly tuned so that melee can fight the way that they're used to. It would be really interesting to switch it up once in a while. And the key part of that quote is the way they're used to. I think that is a key facet of combat in general, because with Pantheon, we're presented, we've talked about this enough times now, right? That we're going to be presented with so much more variance in what we're up against. And it kind of makes sense to add just more dynamic things like this. Like, oh, I'm in a situation where I'm not fully prepared to fight a flying creature. And you have to figure out what to do about it. Do you run? Do you, try to wait for an opportunity to strike and turtle up until then? There's a lot that can go into it, right?
Yeah, I think you run.
You think you run?
I mean, yeah. I think you run. I mean, like, it's a dangerous world out there, and you should be afraid of the things that are out there. And some things are going to be no matter what level you are, maybe there's just some things you can't even scratch, you can't touch, you can't even do any damage to them because they're just not, your tool set doesn't include that ability. We haven't seen this from Pantheon. Let's be clear. We haven't really seen this kind of a mechanic in anything Pantheon's demonstrated. Certainly not anything I can think of off the top of my head. You mentioned the monk video. If that's the only
that's all we've got
so
far. And like Man of Rohan, it kind of halfway addresses that, saying like, he'd prefer some version of not just floating in front of you while you kill it. They need to move around and swoop and stuff.
Yeah.
But that is what we've seen so far, is the just hovering in front of you as you hit it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, I mentioned gliders earlier, right? So, we know there's something that they're doing with, whether it's player characters only, or maybe they can do that with NPCs flying through the air in some capacity. I don't know how the glider system they've referenced is going to work. We haven't ever seen it or have any other details about it. But I think that probably ties into this somehow, because, I mean, if you're thinking about, look at it from a PvP perspective. Can I shoot somebody down when they're gliding, through the air? Like,
point.
Is that a possibility?
Yeah, good point. I think it goes without saying that there's going to be some, as you might call it, Z-axis movement. I think that's definite. Like that, there's no way around that. 3D pathing is a little bit more difficult for sure, but I wouldn't say it's outside the range of possibility. We've seen flying creatures in other games, oftentimes more in like raids and stuff, right? But right. I don't know, man. I think it's an interesting conversation, at least, and there are I believe, ways to balance it. Feasty even points out, Feasty Central on the forums, says like if the balance thing is such a problem, you could actually imagine that some things might actually be harder for range classes even. Like you're trying to shoot a bow at this thing that's flapping around in the sky versus something that's rooted in the ground might be a little bit more hard, same with spells and stuff. Like there's a lot of ways you can kind of roll it, but I don't know. I just want to grab this kind of a little bit for the laughs because, the bait of the title, but also, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, when you talk about shooting things out of the sky, keep in mind, this is a tab target game, right? So to be able to do that, you need to adjust you have to be able to see, look up, look vertically, and then tab to something in the sky. Like, I feel like there's a lot of mechanics in play here that might make it difficult being a tab target style game and not a action game, like where I'm, FPS style aiming my bow or whatever.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I don't know.
And that's why I think with tab targeting, you kind of have to simulate some things, right? Maybe. Yeah. But yeah, I would like to see this in something outside of just scripted raid encounters. I'll take it if that's all we get, right? But I think you can make the argument that this kind of thing could be annoying, but I do think it aligns pretty well with Pantheon, at least in the sense that if you go to an area with like flying creatures, it adds completely new dimension, the pun intended, of like danger and combat style. Like if you're not prepared, maybe go somewhere that favors your build. And I think that's kind of the moral of the story here, is whether or not this whole mechanic gets implemented and to what degree. Pantheon is very much about either not always being at your best because your build has certain benefits and drawbacks, but also just that you have to figure that out. This is just another kind of step to that. If there's a canyon full of flying creatures and you literally don't have any ranged abilities, don't go there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll bring a little lore into this. Dragons are going to be a thing. We know dragons are out there. We know that they're in the world still. They're just not active in the world. I'd imagine they're going to be in game, and we are going to be fighting them at some point, or we will be interacting with them in some capacity. I would assume fighting them. Have you ever seen a dragon that doesn't fly? No. There is no such thing as a dragon that doesn't fly in any kind of decent high fantasy.
I can't wait universe. For people to respond to that. Be like, actually, that would be a worm. Actually, or something like that.
Yes, push your glasses up your nose right now. Tell me about the land dragon that you once encountered in a game. I'm dying to hear about.
Really, though, I think that there just needs to be something to mix it up a little bit and not seem so silly that a dragon would just stand there, while you do your thing. Rocknil Thamos, like as he's burninating the countryside, he's huge. I'm pretty sure it doesn't make it sound like he's not flying. He's
he's definitely flying. He's definitely flying. Yeah, it talks about it in the lore at the final culmination of the Deicide War.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, that's a bit of a soapboxy thing, but the discussion is open in so many different places now. The original forum post, Twitter. I think it's even on like YouTube communities. It's all over. So get your thoughts in there. Maybe you absolutely hate the idea of not being able to hit something all the time, but maybe you have some special ideas that VR can work off, and maybe their current system, how they have pathing and movement in the game, maybe it actually makes this not that difficult. So throw your ideas in there, and I think that's going to be it for this week's community discussion. The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. All right, Community Spotlight time. As you said I would mention, we're going to talk about Wizen posting another Weissen Thalesred Scrawlings chapter 9, I believe, was posted this last week, and chapter 10 coming up this coming week. And again, ranking these out all of a sudden. So thanks, Wizen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good job, Wizen.
And another one, we've got Sparoh doing another calendar recap. Really handy little video. And I actually, we've talked about this before the show, but Sparoh got a new mic too. So the video quality is, going up as well. So it's a nice companion video, tells you about the schedule. And let's get to more video content. So we've got another Sir Medieval video, and this one was kind of fun. This is I have to say the titles. I don't know why this has become a thing, Eric, but I think it's half because they can get kind of ridiculous. But this one is The Progression System Explained, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen MMORPG, Horizontal Gear Abilities, by Sir Medieval.
I feel like it's if you don't use all the characters that YouTube allows you in the title of your video, you're not maximizing your
that's right
your reach.
That's right. But really the video is great. I thoroughly enjoyed it, A, because I also am passionate about the progression systems, but B, because he tackled, I would say, most of the main things, and I would say also painted a pretty solid picture of how progression's going to look in Pantheon, which is, something I don't think a lot of people have a full understanding of. And so that's exciting.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to watch this one yet. So okay. Watch it later.
Well, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. And then we've got RedbeardFlynn, our guy. And this one's just titled, Is Pantheon Making Progress? And I'm starting to find that I'm kind of liking these bait videos. But
I give him a pass. I mean, I like RedbeardFlynn, but you gotta play the game.
Well, this one's a little cleaner, right? Because Redbeard's never kind of made a controversial kind of a thing too much with Pantheon. And this is really just bait because it's really him just talking about all the recent progress and saying the reason he hasn't been doing a lot with Pantheon is just because he's busy. He's busy making other banger videos right now. But as usual, you can expect plenty of humor and great content, some alliteration, even something else I'm a big fan of. But that's up, and always love seeing stuff from Redbeard. Now, here's a nice new little surprise. This one is from Mr. Cuddleshire.
Yeah, this was neat, right?
This was such a treat. So this one's called Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the last bastion of the MMO genre. And I know that's a pretty bold title, right? But I can't stress enough. This was actually my favorite part of this whole thing was, so it got a bunch of quotes from Taham, Joppa, Chris Rowan, kind of condensed them all together. And I think he's super effective in showing why at least VR they've got something good going on.
Yeah, a really good sense of humor in this one. Lots of fun little moments, and I left a comment on it because I told him how much I liked it. So it's nice to see new personalities.
Absolutely. So I look forward to seeing more from Mr. Cuddleshire. I'm actually curious if Mr. Cuddleshire is someone else in the community, or that I just has a different name on the Discord or something. That happens a lot, Yeah. But if you listen, reach out to us because we really loved your video. But yeah, for some reason I kind of feel like I'm missing something this week. We've got a nice handful of stuff in the spotlight, but still, I don't know. There's something. I don't know. You ever get that feeling like I'm forgetting something?
Oh yeah. Every day, every minute of every day.
For sure.
At that point in my life.
If I am missing something, our viewers, let me know. Just in case. I can't claim to always be on top of everything. I try to get the big stuff, but feel free to drop a comment or even reach out to me on Discord if I missed a video or some piece of content. And I think that's actually just going to be it for this week's Community Spotlight.
Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know. All right, so a little bit of a light lore this week because I did run out of time to record and put together the longer pieces that we usually do here. But I ran across a really obscure piece of lore when I was doing some research for my Halner Cave video that I mentioned earlier. And I thought it would be kind of fun to share here. So instead of doing a pre-recorded thing, I'm just going to read it live and give it to you that way. I'll throw some music underneath it when we're in post-production, as they say. But this is about a little group called the Cult of 582. And you probably have never heard of them, but let's learn about them. So, the Cult of 582 are an Ulthuan cult of death, which started as a taboo fancy among certain members of the Bastion aristocracy. Like many vices that begin as an innocent interest in darkness, 582's membership was driven to deeper indulgences over just a few years. When they were eventually betrayed, a surprising number of the cult chose to withdraw from Thronefast altogether. The mysteries they once pursued out of boredom and excess had transformed into an inescapable obsession. Sadly, 582 found what they were looking for. Their fate, while unique, is shared by multiple populations across the globe. Their story connects back to one of the older bases of power on Terminus, although it is a weak and distant relationship. And that is the lore you know. I gotta tell you, Desrin, I used to do those like live like that all the time, and it's like the challenge of reading it smoothly is really challenging. So it's kind of good to flex those muscles again.
You did pretty good, man. I struggle with the same thing. It's way harder than it probably seems to a lot of folks.
Yeah, you have no idea when I record like take after take sometimes, because certain words, Ulthuan death cult was something I was worried about, and Thronefastion always trips me up too. So got through those. Pretty proud of myself for that. So let's wrap the show up. A couple reminders. Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations to whoever won the pledge giveaway that we were doing today. So that is awesome. Get in touch with me. You can do it on Discord, Theric2057 on Discord, or you can email me, theric@pantheon.plus, and we will get that pledge to you and get you set up for that. I want to say a reminder to everybody that there's no show next week. Des is on vacation, so we're going to take the week off, and we'll be back on Sunday, September 18th, noon Eastern, on our usual time and place for everybody for the premiere for that. And I also want to say good luck to all my fellow NFL fans out there for your season starting next week, except if you're a 49ers fan, because they play the Bears. So
you didn't.
Bad luck to you.
Oh.
I did. Yep. Sorry, San Francisco fans. You're not my friends this week.
I wonder how many viewers we just lost. Thanks, Theric.
Say, man, I don't care. Bears come first in all things. It's been my life, so it is what it is. But we'll leave it there. I want to say thank you to everybody for hanging out with us. As always, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Leave a 5-star review on your podcast provider for the show. It helps us reach more people. And with that, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Take care.
I'm out of here, friends.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric @PantheonTheric on Twitter, and Desrin @DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.